Welcome to the Cyber Center for Biblical Studies. Hi, my name is Herb Bateman. In the past two videos, we've studied introductory issues for the letter of Jude. We've looked at the authorship for Jude, the recipients for the letter of Jude, the date and writing of Jude, and the occasion for the writing of Jude. Today we want to focus on the letter of Jude itself, the genre of Jude. Today we have with us Scott Barger, pastor of the New Horizon Community Church in Warsaw, Indiana. And once again, Scott is going to address some questions that's going to guide our discussion as we just talk about the genre of Jude.
Most pastors will realize, Herb, that identifying and understanding the genre of a book in the Bible is really important to interpreting the book of the Bible correctly. You say that Jude is a letter, but before we talk about Jude as a letter, I thought maybe I'd ask you to maybe compare and contrast letters the way they were written in Jude's day and letters the way that we tend to write them today.
That's true. Our mode of communicating today is that of email. But yet in many ways, email is very much like an ancient letter. A typical email has a message header. It identifies to whom the email is to be sent. It identifies the subject of the email and identifies the date of the email. Below the message header is the message box. Within the box, we write our message. We close our message by either typing in our name or using a pre-formatted signature at the end of our message. The structure of Jude is similar to that of the structure of an email. It has an opening salutation that identifies the author of the letter, to whom the letter is written, and a greeting in verses 1 and 2. It has a body where Jude's message occurs in verses 3 to 23, and closes with a doxology in verses 24 and 25. So Jude's structure is basically an opening salutation, a body, and a doxology. Now this structure is not unlike the structure that you would find in ancient letter writing. There's a group of letters that were found in a dump in Egypt that are called the Oxyrhynchus letters. And it was in this dump that we have many types of letters written by common folk. Letters that were letters from a father to a son, from a son to a father. They were letters that were from a businessman to a governor. They were letters from one governor to another governor. They were receipts of normal people. And so within this group of letters that have been collected and part of a collection of letters called the Oxyrhynchus letters, there are letters that reflect a similar structure that you would find in the New Testament, where there's an opening salutation, a body, and a closing salutation. And I'll share one letter from the Oxyrhynchus collection written from a son to his father concerning his health and his well-being.
Harpocras to Thrakidashis, Father, very many greetings. Knowing that you will be delighted, I feel obliged to write you that there is nothing the matter with me, but that I was rather lethargic for only a very few days and have been feeling better for some time, and there is nothing the matter with me. I was greatly delighted to read through your letter, in which I learned, my Lord Father, that you were in excellent health, and because I was tremendously elated in spirit on receiving your letter, I at once thought it might be an oracle of the god, and my health improved remarkably. Receive from Petakon, who is bringing you the letter, a pair of sandals worth 4 drachmas. Quickly tell me whatever else you have need of, as I still have a few days here. Give my best wishes to Thatres, my mother, Thaisus, Serapion, Ariston, Tycharion, Nike, Eutych, and everyone in the house.
Okay, Herb, so the Oxyrhynchus papyri, that sounds about as hard to find as it is to say. Do you have any other recommendations of sources that a pastor like me might go to learn more about the way letters worked during the Second Temple period?
Yes, Scott, you're right. The Oxyrhynchus letter collection is an extensive collection of letters that would be quite expensive and really unnecessary for a pastor's library. You can find this collection in most seminaries, but I'd recommend Stauer's book on letter writing in the Greco-Roman world. It's a collection, it's selectively collected letters that parallel the types of letters that we see in the New Testament, which we'll talk a little bit more, I think, in time. Another place that you might go and look at letters and letter writing in the New Testament may be found in my book entitled Interpreting the General Letters. It is chapter 2. It talks about the genre of the general letters, and it too is a helpful source to go to and compare ancient letters with the letters that we see in the New Testament.
So you keep describing Jude as a letter, that's a genre letter, but you also mentioned there's different kinds of letters, different types of letters. What do you mean by that? And what kind of letter is the book of Jude?
So when we look at the letter of Jude, we can identify the type of letter Jude is by first separating out the greeting, verses 1 and 2, and the doxology in verses 24 and 25. They basically are the opening and closing of the letter. Verses 3 and 4, you have an admonition being given to the Judean followers of Jesus, essentially telling the followers of Jesus to defend their faith. In verses 17 to 23, Jude returns to admonitions to Jewish followers of Jesus by encouraging them to be merciful to those in the church, to witness to those outside the church, and extend mercy to those that are outside the church. In the middle of this section, there's this vituperative description of the godless rebels and their judgment, verses 5 to 17. So that Jude is essentially a letter of admonition and a letter that is vituperative in its describing the godless. So it is a vituperative admonition type letter.
Okay, sounds reasonable, but what does vituperative mean?
Vituperative is just a fancy word for scathing. It's a scathing description of the godless, whom we've described or whom we have identified as being the zealots of Jude's day. And it's interesting that the scathing descriptions that Jude gives of the godless oftentimes parallel the scathing descriptions that Josephus gives of the godless zealots as he's looking back on the zealot movement. So in closing, Scott, Jude writes a vituperative letter of admonition to the Judeans. He opens his letter in a very customary way, and he closes his letter with a doxology. Then in the portions of the letter that are admonition, he admonishes the Judean believers to defend their faith, to stand up for Jesus, who is our King. And then in verses 17 to 23, Jude tells us the way that we defend the faith, the way that we stand up for the King, is to exhibit mercy. And we extend the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ and persuade people to follow Jesus. But in the middle of this section, Jude wants to make it perfectly clear that rebellion has always been punished. It doesn't matter who rebels, whether you're a chosen people of Israel in the Exodus generation, whether you're an angel, whether you're a Gentile urbanite, God punishes rebellion. Jude makes it perfectly clear. Rebels are damned. And the presence of rebellion and the subsequent punishment of rebellion has been foretold in 1 Enoch and by the apostles. In verses in verses 5 through 16. So it does help to know the type of letter that Jude is, so that we don't preach it at a wedding. It's not the type of letter you'd preach at a wedding. But it is a letter that would be helpful to Christians that are perhaps struggling with living in a society that's constantly rebelling. And we're not to be rebellious people. We are to be people that defend what we believe about Jesus as King, and in the process, be merciful in doing so.